going to vote yes for ID to vote?
I'm for photo ID. We have photo ID here in Florida. And so I have no problem with photo ID. What's being proposed is a separate, completely different identification just for voting.
Now, wait a minute, because the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, is requiring voters to show ID to vote. And they also require a citizenship so that you stay with the law and, in fact, only have American citizens voting. So, again, will you vote yes to that act?
Yes, so again, there's no evidence that non-citizens are voting.
American citizens vote in American elections. So having an ID to vote would be in step with the law. So are you going to vote for the law?
If they put forward a bill that says you can use your driver's license or your state-issued identification to vote, I support that. The SAVE Act goes way beyond that. It would affect women whose birth certificate doesn't match their driver's license. It will depress turnout by requiring people to go and re-register to go get this new voter ID.
Congressman. That's not true.
This is about depressing turnout. It's not about making sure non-citizens vote.
Let them use their driver's license either, Congressman. The SAVE Act is a requirement for ID to vote, period. And that was Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz with me here yesterday on why he voted against the Save America Election Integrity Act. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is now pledging the bill will get a vote come down to the floor when they are back in session next week, though scheduling does depend on whether or not the partial government shutdown comes to an end. The SAVE Act has backing and support from 50 Senate Republicans, and of course J.D. Vance would be 51, enough to clear at least one procedural hurdle, but not enough to overcome a filibuster with that Democrat support. Joining us now is former Trump official and podcast host Katie Miller. Katie, great to see you. Welcome back. I want to get your reaction to the congressman there, Congressman Moskowitz's comments about illegals not voting or not trying to vote. Your thoughts?
My favorite thing he said was that a married woman's birth certificate wouldn't match her driver's license. That, for one, is shocking, Maria. I'm shocked that my birth certificate doesn't match my husband's last name, who I did not know when I was born. First, it was racist to have voter ID. Now it's sexist to have voter ID. And why are 216 House Democrats opposed to something that over 80% of Americans overwhelmingly support? It's because there are millions, tens of millions of illegal aliens in our country who we know are participating in democracy. If they believe so vehemently that there are no illegal aliens participating, then why don't they vote for something that seems so simple as saying only Americans should vote in American elections? It's fundamental to a functioning democracy.
Yeah, and that's what I tried to convey yesterday, but he was making a point that there was more in the SAVE Act than just proving that you are an American citizen. And he said that a license is good enough. Now, I pushed back and said, no, a license is not good enough because the license process, issuing licenses, has been abused. Look at all of the stories that we've been reporting how, illegals are driving Mack trucks and they don't even understand English and can't read the signs on the road. In fact, we've had fatalities as a result of that.
If you look at what's going on in California, when illegal aliens came across the border in droves, Gavin Newsom gave them a license, free housing, free health care. California is in a massive budget deficit because they're currently giving illegal aliens free health care and instead charging billionaires tons and tons of money in taxes to be able to afford paying basic necessities. You look at stories out of L.A. saying now they're cutting teachers. Why can't they afford to pay their teachers in L.A. County? That's because they're too busy funding every single illegal alien who's crossed the border, Maria.
Yeah,
and that's what happens when you give all these illegal aliens driver's licenses. It isn't too much to say that I only want Americans to vote in American elections.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, I'm with Ashley Davis this morning. And Ashley, I wonder what you think about this idea that we could see a quote-unquote talking filibuster, where the Senate has everybody talking about it, and that would expose who, in fact, is against having an ID to vote.
Yeah, listen, I'm for it. I actually think
But John Thune said it's coming to the floor for a vote.
Absolutely. I think it comes next week. I mean, obviously, we have the budget shut down and what happens there. But no, I'm for him actually forcing a vote, which is a step further than the talking filibuster, because then it has Democrats on record and the two Republicans that are not necessarily voting for it. On record saying that they don't support this. And as Katie just mentioned, this issue is 80%, it polls at 80% in regards to the people.
83%, I think, of the people want ID to vote. But what about that, Katie? Do you feel like we could see a talking filibuster? Would that achieve much?
I think the Senate needs to do more than nothing because the American people, as I've now just said and she repeated, was that over 80% believe this is common sense policy. And when 80% of Americans believe in something, then our Congress should act upon it and they should do something as it regards to passing that. And as President Trump has said, if Congress fails to act and this gets blocked in the Senate, he will take executive action to ensure our elections are sacrosanct in this country. And that is what he needs to do as Commander-in-Chief. It was point number 19 on his platform when 77 million Americans not only voted for President Trump, but the entire Republican National Committee voted for President Trump's platform at the July 2024 convention. This was point 19, was ensuring voter integrity via ensuring only Americans can vote in American elections.
Yeah, the president said he would do an executive order going into the midterms, but can he do that, or will the states push back on an executive order in that regard, Katie?
I'm sure just like everything else we've seen, every single blue state governor is going to resist and protest Trump at every single turn because they believe that's popular policy.
Yeah.
But in the end, we've seen President Trump be successful countless times, especially as issues reach the Supreme Court. And I'm sure, I don't know what they have cooking in that White House, but they cook, Maria. They know how to get it done for the American people.
Yeah, I want to get your take on the State of the Union Tuesday night, and then we can get back to Minnesota, which I want to get your take on. But several Democrats are planning to boycott the president's State of the Union on Tuesday night. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries claims he's going to be there, though. Watch what he said. Listen to this.
My current plan is to attend. We're not going to Donald Trump's house. He's coming to our house. It's my view that you don't let anyone ever run you off of your block. The two options that are in front of us in our house is to either attend with silent defiance or to not attend and send a message to Donald Trump in that fashion, which will include participation in a variety of different alternate programming that is going to take place in and around the Capitol complex.
I mean, Katie, what's the message? The economy is doing incredibly well. We're in this golden age that President Trump promised. He's actually taking down adversaries and those who are bringing drugs into the country, like Nicolas Maduro. Are you expecting Democrats to boycott the State of the Union again?
As we've seen from Democrats at the Munich Security Conference, they have no message. They aren't prepared to be leaders on the world stage. All they have left is political theater and far-left talking points to try to win over the American people, which, Maria, we've seen countless times. We know it doesn't work. The American people overwhelmingly support President Trump and his agenda because what he does is he delivers countless times, ending 8 wars, having a booming economy, having the affordability hoax just totally thrown out because he's working for the American people day in and day out. And all the Democrats have left is what, booing the president at the State of the Union as he talks about popular policies that the American people support, like his health care agenda, like lowering the cost of drugs for the American people. Those are things that are bipartisan, that should be bipartisan, but that Democrats only want to resist and protest because they think that's popular with that far left wing of the base that cheer them on because that's who's giving them that infinite feedback loop.
Yeah.
And guess what? That's not middle America. That's not independence. That's just the AOC caucus.
Yeah, well, and we saw how much AOC knows about foreign policy when she was umming and awing when asked a question at the Munich Security Council conference. You're right. Shokasoni, you reported just a few minutes ago how great the economy is doing, whether it be inflation, lowest level since May, or 130,000 jobs in the last. The president has a great story to tell. He's going to tell it on Tuesday night. No wonder they don't want to hear it.
He's going to be doing it today. He's going to Georgia later this afternoon. He's going to talk about the economy, according to Caroline Levitt, talk about affordability. And Katie, that is the thing. That is the messaging that the president and the administration have. Is the plan, do you believe, to continue to hit that economic message? Because that is what is going to be, on the ballot come November. Let's be clear.
Absolutely. We heard this week that Susie Wiles and the top team in the White House gathered the president's cabinet to talk about how that is going to be our preeminent message going into the midterms, was talking about affordability, lowering health care prices, and what the president has done for the American people in terms of what it's done to make life more accessible and affordable for moms like myself who have kids who are going to buy groceries, who are stopping to get gas on the way home. And President Trump has made that the foremost priority of his agenda, and that's what the American people want to hear, and that's what the president and his cabinet are going to talk about going into the midterms, because that's a winning issue, and that isn't divisive. It should be bipartisan. But yet, as we saw from AOC and these far-left Democrats traveling all the way to Germany to slam our law enforcement, or for AOC not being able to identify a single policy issue with China or Taiwan. You know, Maria, I bet you she can't even determine where Taiwan is on a map. She probably thinks it's next to Argentina, the same way she thinks Venezuela is below the equator.
Yeah.
So
well,
that's what the Democrats have in contrast to President Trump.
Yeah, when I saw that in terms of her answering a question, which is a very viable question, you know, what will the U.S. do when and if China goes into Taiwan? But she had no answers. By the way, the meeting at the White House was led by Susie Wiles, we're told. Most of the cabinet members were there, like Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick, RFK, Sean Duffy, along with other senior aides. And apparently it went on for 2 hours talking about what the president is going to focus on, all the wins that he's going to focus on Tuesday night. Well, I want to get your take on Minnesota, because Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey are demanding the federal government reimburse the state and city for costs tied to the recent DHS immigration enforcement actions. Governor Walz is proposing a $10 million relief package for small business, which he says is feeling the effects of President Trump's immigration crackdown. The push following reports that up to $18 billion was stolen from Minnesota social services programs, all allegedly linked to Somali immigrant communities, Katie. So, you know, they're trying to, I guess, play on the fact that the operation in Minnesota has ended and just sweeping up all that fraud under the rug, Katie.
Simply $9 billion of Somali fraud was not enough for Tim Walz and Jacob Frey. No, they have to add 10 million more in fraud that is going to go to these small businesses, because they still have yet to get under control how the fraud happened in the first place, and how these government workers were just doling out candy left and right without any checks whatsoever. Yet here they are wanting to do 10 million more in funds to them. It's enough already, Maria.
Yeah.
You know what? All ICE did was try to save the community money by deporting people who have no right or legal right to be in our country as charged by U.S. Congress. If they don't like the laws and they should change them, they should not just sit there and cry and cry and cry over President Trump enforcing the laws that are on our books.
Absolutely.
And that's what he's doing.
All right, Katie, we will see you on the Katie Miller podcast. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thanks,
We'll see you soon. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back.